When I asked my mom about the Hawaii trip I'd paid $22,000 for, she said it like nothing. Oh, we already went last week, only for family. The phone almost slipped from my hand. Only for family. The words burned colder than the buffalo snow outside my window. I drained my savings trying to hold this family together after my divorce, and somehow I was the one left out. That night, I didn't cry, didn't scream. I poured myself a drink and stared at the frozen street below, because if they thought they could erase me that easily, they were about to find out what family really costs. After my divorce, I kept telling myself family would be my anchor. When everything else collapsed, my marriage, my sense of direction, the house that suddenly felt like someone else's, I thought going home would make it better. Instead, it made me smaller. I rented a one-bedroom apartment in Buffalo, the kind with old radiators that hissed through the night. My job in finance kept me busy enough to forget, but not enough to stop feeling. So I did what I knew best: numbers, structure, solutions. Every time my mom called about a tight month, I covered it. When Dad's car broke down, I paid the repair shop over the phone. Erin, my sister, never called unless she needed something: rent, utilities, a new laptop for her online courses. I never questioned it. I just wired the money and told myself it was love. Over 2 years, the payments blurred into routine. Rent, bills, groceries, the quiet kind of giving that drains you slowly. I told my therapist I couldn't afford sessions anymore, but the truth was, I stopped going because I felt guilty spending on myself. I started keeping a spreadsheet for their expenses labeled neatly as if organization could make it feel like control. When I first suggested the Hawaii trip, Mom sounded delighted. "We all need a reset," she'd said. I imagined us on the beach, sunlight soft on our faces, laughing the way we hadn't in years. It felt like redemption, a chance to rewrite our story. I spent nights comparing hotels, choosing one with ocean views and breakfast included. I booked snorkeling tours, dinners, airport transfers. Every detail perfect. I told myself the money didn't matter. I wanted to see them happy again. Maybe then they'd look at me and see more than the daughter who failed at marriage. On the night I booked the flights, I sat at my desk staring at the confirmation email glowing on my screen. My reflection in the glass looked tired, but hopeful. I didn't know that hope was the most expensive part of the trip. The next morning, Mom texted a simple, "Got it," with a heart emoji. I smiled back, not realizing that message would be the last time she'd treat me like part of the family. Because the truth, betrayal doesn't come all at once. It builds quietly, one payment, one favor, one unanswered thank you at a time. The call came on a gray Saturday morning, one of those Buffalo days when the sky looks like wet concrete. I had my coffee in hand, my to-do list open, the kind of morning where you think you're finally getting your life together. Then I saw Mom's name light up my phone. I answered with a smile I didn't realize I still practiced. "Hey, Mom, how's the Hawaii planning going?" There was a pause too long to be bad service. "Oh," she said finally, her tone clipped, almost bored. "We already went last week. Only for family." For a second I thought she was joking. My laugh came out brittle. "What do you mean, went?" "I booked those tickets. All 4 of them." "Yes, you did," she replied, her voice smooth like she was explaining something obvious. "It was lovely, Louisa. We just needed some time together. You've been so busy with work." I opened my mouth, but nothing came. I could hear the ocean in the background, wind, laughter, the distant cry of seagulls. Then she hung up. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered against the counter. Coffee bled down the white cabinets, pooling on the floor. I stood there numb, listening to the radiator hiss like it was mocking me. Only for family. I spent the rest of the day trying to convince myself I'd misunderstood. Maybe there'd been a mix-up, a surprise, anything that didn't mean what it sounded like. But when I checked the email receipts, I saw it clearly, my name nowhere on the itinerary. I'd paid every cent, but the guest list was just them. The next few days blurred. I went to work, smiled through meetings, signed off budgets, but inside something was unraveling. Every transfer I'd ever made to them flashed through my mind like a ledger of humiliation: bills, rent, car repairs, all the little ways I'd tried to buy belonging. One night I pulled out a photo from years ago, Thanksgiving, before the divorce. Mom and Dad stood in the center, Aaron next to them, arms linked. I was off to the side, holding the camera remote half cut from the frame. I hadn't noticed it then, but now it felt like a prophecy. That night, I didn't cry. I sat in the dark, the phone face down beside me, and realized something I should have known years ago: love that has to be purchased isn't love. It's a transaction. And like every transaction, there comes a point when the account runs out. The next time my phone rang with their name on it, I didn't pick up. Not yet. A month passed. Snow turned to gray slush, and the city felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. I hadn't spoken to my parents or Aaron since the Hawaii call, though their absence filled the silence louder than words ever could. Then one evening, while I was sorting through reports at my kitchen table, my phone buzzed. Aaron's name flashed across the screen. For a second, I almost didn't answer, but curiosity habit won. "Hey, Lou," she said, her voice syrupy, sweet. "Listen, the rent's overdue again. The landlord's been on my back. Can you send $2,000, just until next week?" I stared at the glowing numbers on my laptop. 2,000. My mind went back to the trip to her smiling somewhere on a beach I'd paid for. "Only for family, remember," I said softly. What she asked, the sweetness cracking. "You heard me." The silence that followed was thick and ugly. Then she laughed sharp and fake. "Don't be ridiculous, Louisa. You're family. You've always helped us. Not anymore." I ended the call before she could argue. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, something colder, cleaner. Relief. I opened my banking app, scrolled to the automatic payments I'd set up years ago: rent, transfers, car insurance, phone bills, even their internet. My fingers hovered, then tapped cancel. One by one, the confirmations popped up. Canceled. 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 Each click sounded like a door closing for good. When I was done, I called my financial advisor. "I want to secure my accounts completely," I told her. "New passwords, two-factor verification, everything." She didn't ask why. Maybe she didn't need to. The next morning, I drove to the bank, handed over my ID, and signed the forms. My advisor slid them back to me, nodding. "You're taking control," she said quietly. I smiled. Finally. Outside, the wind cut sharp against my cheeks, but it felt different now, like it was clearing the air. That afternoon, I called a locksmith. "Can you install new locks and a camera system?" By evening, Mike the technician was at my door. A big man with steady hands, the kind of guy who didn't ask questions. He replaced the old brass lock with a heavy deadbolt, mounted a camera above the frame, and showed me the app to monitor it. When he left, I stood by the door watching the feed. The blinking red lights stared back at me, steady and unbothered. For the first time in years, my apartment felt like mine. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and stared at the quiet street below. Somewhere out there, Aaron was fuming, Mom was plotting, and Dad was pretending not to notice. They'd call again. I knew it. But this time, I was ready. It didn't take long. 2 days later, the doorbell rang, 3 sharp buzzes that cut through the quiet like a blade. I froze, staring at the small screen on my phone that streamed the camera feed. There they were. Mom in her thick fur coat, arms crossed like she was about to fire someone. Dad beside her shoulders, slumped eyes darting everywhere but the camera. Aaron, of course, in front, lip gloss, shining, her phone in hand, pretending this wasn't humiliating. And next to her, a man in a gray suit clutching a briefcase. I didn't even need to hear him speak to know who he was. I took a slow breath, walked to the door, and opened it just enough to show my face. Louisa. Mom said first, the practiced calm in her voice barely hiding irritation. "We need to talk." "I'm listening," I said flatly. The man in the suit stepped forward. "Ms. Mercer, I'm representing your parents and sister. They're concerned about your recent financial decisions. They've asked me to mediate before this escalates." "Escalates," I repeated, leaning on the doorframe. "You mean before you drag me into court for cutting off your allowance?" His jaw tightened. "They feel your choices are erratic, potentially unstable." Aaron scoffed behind him. "We just want to help Lou. You've been through a lot." My laugh was short, bitter. "Help? You went on a trip I paid for and didn't even tell me. You don't want to help, you want control." "Watch your tone," Mom snapped. "We're family." "Right," I said. Only for family, wasn't that it? Her face twitched, but she didn't reply. Dad finally spoke, voice low. "Louisa, be reasonable. You know they depend on you." I looked at him, at the same man who used to teach me how to balance a checkbook, who once said independence was everything. "They're grown adults, Dad. They can depend on themselves." The lawyer cleared his throat. "If you refuse support, we'll have to file for guardianship to protect your assets and theirs. It's not uncommon in cases like this." That word guardianship hit me like ice water. They weren't just trying to guilt me. They were trying to own me. I straightened, meeting the lawyer's eyes. "Then I'll see you in court." And I shut the door in their faces. For a long time I stood there breathing hard, the sound of their muffled voices bleeding through the door. I let them shout, let them threaten. When the noise finally faded, I poured another glass of wine, sat by the window, and let the city hum fill the space they'd once occupied. A week later, the letter arrived. A formal notice from the county courthouse. Petition for guardianship, filed by Marianne George and Aaron Mercer. Reason: concerns over Louisa Mercer's emotional stability and financial judgment. It was absurd. It was cruel. It was exactly what they'd do. I called my friend Janet the second I finished reading. She didn't sound surprised. "They're trying to break you, Lou," she said. "You need a lawyer." She gave me a name, Daniel Price, a man she'd worked with when her own brother tried to sue her for inheritance money. "He doesn't scare easy," she added. The next morning I met Daniel in his office downtown, a quiet man in his 50s with calm eyes and a voice that carried weight. After I explained everything, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "What they're doing is manipulation, pure and simple. But we'll need to prove your competence in every way possible." "Fine," I said. "Tell me what to do." He listed everything: employment records, bank statements, evaluations from my doctor, my therapist. "If they're going to paint you as unstable, we'll show them the opposite." For the first time in months, I felt steady. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. 2 weeks later, I walked into the courthouse. The cold marble floors echoed under my heels. My hands were trembling, but my chin was high. Mom, Dad, and Aaron sat at the opposite table, whispering to each other. Aaron wore a black blazer, trying too hard to look professional. Mom's eyes met mine and held no warmth, only challenge. Their lawyer, same man from my doorstep, stood to speak first. "Your Honor, Ms. Mercer has exhibited signs of instability, erratic financial behavior, and isolation following her divorce. Her family believes she is unfit to manage her affairs." I could almost laugh. They'd built a fantasy version of me, a woman falling apart. Daniel rose calmly. "Your Honor, what you'll see today is not instability, but independence. My client is a successful financial manager with a decade of consistent employment. She has no debt, no erratic spending, and no history of instability. The only thing she's guilty of is saying no." He handed over the thick folder we'd prepared, pay stubs, evaluations records of every transfer I'd ever made to them. Mom looked away. Erin rolled her eyes. When the judge called me to the stand, my pulse quickened. I took the oath, sat down, and met the judge's gaze. "Ms. Mercer," he said, "in your own words, why did you cut off financial support to your family?" I took a breath. "Because I realized I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their bank account." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. "I supported them for years, rent bills, groceries. I even paid for a family vacation to Hawaii, thinking it would bring us closer. But when I asked about it, my mother said, 'We already went, only for family.'" The judge raised an eyebrow. "And you weren't invited?" "No, Your Honor. I wasn't even told." Daniel nodded, stepping forward. "And after that, I stopped paying." A month later, they called, asking for rent money. I told them, "Only for family, remember." Gasps scattered through the benches behind me. Mom's face flushed red. Aaron's jaw tightened. The judge leaned back, expression unreadable. Daniel handed over the final document, an evaluation from my doctor confirming I was mentally and emotionally fit. "Your Honor, the only instability here is the family's financial dependence on my client." The lawyer on their side tried to object, but his voice sounded thin now, desperate. After a pause, the judge spoke. "The court finds no evidence of incapacity. Petition denied. Case dismissed." Just like that. I didn't smile. Not yet. I just exhaled, the sound trembling out of me. Mom stood slowly, gripping her purse like a lifeline. Erin looked like she might cry, though I couldn't tell if it was from shame or rage. Dad avoided my eyes entirely. As they gathered their papers, I turned toward them one last time. "You wanted control," I said quietly. "Now you have none." Then I walked out. Outside, the cold air hit me like a baptism. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying anyone's weight, but my own. The courthouse steps gleamed wet from melted snow, and as I walked down, I thought about the phrase that started it all. Only for family. It used to sting. Now it made me smile. Because I finally understood sometimes the only way to protect your peace is to shut the door, lock it, and let them knock on the outside. 3 months after the trial, Buffalo finally thawed. The snow melted into quiet streams along the sidewalks, and for the first time in years, the city didn't feel like a cage. I moved into a new apartment, smaller but bright, with wide windows that let the afternoon light spill across the floor. The silence here was different, peaceful, earned. I spent my mornings making coffee, not checking my phone for payment reminders. My evenings were filled with small joys, reading long walks, and a beginner's cooking class at the community center. The first time I made pasta from scratch, the dough tore apart in my hands, but I laughed anyway. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about starting over. Janet and my book club friends visited one weekend, bringing a bottle of wine and more warmth than I'd felt in years. As we toasted, Martha said, "You look lighter, Lou." "I feel lighter," I admitted. Later that night, alone again, I wrote a single line in my journal. "Freedom isn't revenge. It's reclaiming what they took from you." Through a mutual friend, I heard Erin was working double shifts to cover her bills. My parents had moved to a smaller place. I didn't feel satisfaction, just closure. They were finally living their own lives. I stood by my window, watching the city glow in the soft spring dusk, and whispered to myself, "Only for family." This time it wasn't pain. It was peace. That night I sat by the window lights of Buffalo, flickering like quiet promises. For years I'd mistaken sacrifice for love, silence for peace. But losing everything had taught me something simple. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. They said, "Only for family." I learned that real family doesn't demand your wallet to prove your worth. So I kept my boundaries, my freedom, and my name. If you've ever had to walk away from people who claim to love you, share your story below. Someone out there needs to know it's okay to choose yourself,